Hi, this is Ken Parker, welcoming you to Common Ground, the Policy Roundtable, where we discuss issues of concern to Newton residents and try to hammer out some of our differences. As usual on the show, we have some very interesting topics. Tonight we have an education theme, as will soon be revealed in greater detail, and some fabulous panelists. I am particularly excited tonight because we have, for the first time I think in years, a complete all-new panel of no repeat panelists. And these are really, really exciting people to have on the show, as will soon be quite obvious. And so without further ado, let me introduce tonight's panel. On my left, we have Anping Shen. Anping is, welcome to the show, Anping.
Thank you.
Anping is the school committee member from Ward 3, and that means you're elected citywide, but you live in Ward 3.
Correct.
And how long have you been on the school committee, Anping?
Oh, this is my 7th year. I'm going to the 8th year. That will be my last year.
Term limit, so you're limited to 4 two-year terms, so you're in the home stretch. Well, thank you for all that public service. It's a lot of work being on the school committee.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to serve the community. It's a great honor.
And do you want to mention what you do professionally as well, or?
I was the educator, as a lifelong educator. I worked for the State Department of Education, and for 28 years, I retired 2 years ago. So this is my only job. Otherwise, I'm enjoying my retirement.
Oh, that's great. Well, it's a great pleasure having you on the show. I've been watching your work on the school committee with admiration for these 7 years, and so I'm so excited that before your term is up, and I hope you'll come back in your 8th year as well.
Well, certainly, if you invite me.
Oh, you're open-ended invitation. Okay. Anytime you want to come, you just tell me, okay?
Yeah.
Tell me that you want to come and what you want to talk about. You're right here. This is your seat, okay?
Thanks.
It's reserved. We'll put your name on it. Okay. Sumukh. Sumukh, you'll have to help me with your last name.
Tendulkar.
Tendulkar. I didn't want to butcher that.
That's all good.
Sumukh, you're a parent of a high school student, and do you have another child in the Newton Public Schools as well?
No, 2 children, one graduated through NPS.
Oh, through the already?
Already, yeah. He's in college.
Congratulations on getting one out of the nets.
Indeed. And the second one is, she's a sophomore at the high school, Newton South High School.
So you've got a lot of experience from the parent perspective with the Newton Public Schools?
Indeed. And also seeing 2 children who are 5 years apart and seeing what their experience was 5 years apart actually starts drawing some contrasts out, which you would have otherwise not seen had they been closer in age.
And what's your professional background, Sumukh?
I work in a management role for a Japanese multinational company.
Do you want to mention it? You can if you want.
I can. It's NTT, Nippon Telegraph and Telecom.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Of course.
It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
And we have a little bit of a celebrity almost right now, a superstar at the moment, as will soon be apparent. Ryan is a teacher at Newton South High School, and also a math and physics teacher, but also an opinion columnist, at least a one-time opinion columnist in the Boston Globe, which we'll be talking about real soon. Ryan, how long have you taught at Newton South?
This will be my 12th year at Newton South. I started in 2013, right fresh out of college.
I was going to say, you look pretty young to be teaching for 12 years.
Get mistaken for a student once in a while. It's happening less and less, which is very sad.
I guess that's good.
Yeah.
I guess it's better than the other way around, being a student and being...
Yeah.
What do you teach? You've been teaching at South for 12 years, and so right out of school, so what you weren't teaching anywhere else, of course, before that. Where are you from, the Massachusetts area originally?
Yeah, I grew up in Massachusetts, in Uxbridge, Massachusetts, southern central Mass, borders Rhode Island, and then never left. I went to school in Boston and went to Newton and taught there, and
you live in Newton as well.
Now I live in Newton.
And you have kids in the schools too?
Nope, no kids yet.
Not yet.
No kids yet,
No, not implying you should.
Not currently.
Not currently.
Yeah.
Right. All right, well, thank you so much again for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Right. And Joe, also a Newton South teacher. So we've got like all the major academic stuff. We got math, science, and you teach English.
I teach English.
So how long have you been at South?
21 years, I think.
Was that also like right out of school? Or?
No, I taught in Chicago for several years, in 2 different schools in Chicago, and then I taught in Berlin, Germany for a couple of years.
Oh, cool.
And then ended up at Newton South.
What brought you to the Boston area?
I grew up at Red Sox, the Red Sox.
Oh, of course.
The Red Sox. I
So you
here.
grew up in tears, in other words.
I absolutely did. Yes. Yes.
Growing up in Newton, I had that experience every year. This is going to be the. No, it's not going to be the year.
Yeah. Yep.
86 was particularly tough. I was a junior at Newton South that year, and we really thought with Roger Clemens and everything, we had it all going on, and then the Mets did horrible things.
Bruce
to
Hurst,
us.
Oil Can Boyd, I remember them all. It was a memorable year.
Anyway, all right, well, so without further ado, let me introduce tonight's first topic. Now, folks may recall that there's been a lot of discussion around this table about what works and what doesn't work. Our audience members in Newton government and sometimes in education policy. We had a big discussion a few years back about full-day kindergarten. We're going to be talking something that's more at the other end of the grade range, probably more high school focused, obviously having 2 high school teachers as guests, is the efficacy and perhaps some of the equity issues associated with, I guess, what they're calling multi-level classrooms. They might also be called an inclusion model. It's been referred different ways of basically having, the idea is that more, as I understand it, is that more than one difficulty level or advanced level is taught in the same classroom. So you might have, for example, an advanced placement or an honors along with a college prep, I guess they call it ACP, or an ACP in a lower level. College, we're not sure what's the next level?
It's CP,
CP,
ACP, and honors or AP.
I'm not going to remember the terminology anyway, but multiple levels in the same classroom. And so this was, I think, first discussed at a school committee meeting, and of course Anping was on the school committee 5 years ago, and I think we have a clip of that meeting which we'll show in a minute. But for the reason why we are particularly excited to have Ryan, other than obviously tremendously knowledgeable, and is Ryan wrote an op-ed piece in the Boston Globe about this program. So I don't know if we have the front page, but anyone who hasn't read it, it's a very interesting read. Strongly encourage folks to read his views on this. So what I want to do is show a clip, if we can, of that school committee meeting. If we can get that queued up, that would be great. If not, we'll just dive into the discussion and show it. Here it is.
So I have one comment and one question, and the comment is just I've heard lately from a member of our community who is a grown-up who tutors in math, and she's expressed some concerns about the multi-leveled classroom approach, at least in programs like math and science, because I think it's her feeling that the students who are on the lower end of the performing scale are getting lost in those classes. And I think this may echo some of what Serena was talking about, that there are students in some of those classes who just don't feel like they can contribute and their needs aren't getting met, and it's easier to hide perhaps in those classrooms because there are students who are sort of on the higher end of the achievement scale who sort of will cover up their failure to participate as much. And so I guess I just pass that along for what it's worth, because I think that's something that it's probably very hard for a teacher to do, is to really make sure that everybody in those classes is participating and engaged at the same level.
All right, so here we have a prognostication, as it were, from 5 years ago. That's Kathy Shields, who was the Ward 7 member of the school committee at that time. And this was a December 4th, 2019 school committee meeting. So my initial question to the panel is simply, was Kathy right? Did it work? Was this a problem? And more broadly, is the multi-level classroom model working well or not? And Ryan, we know you have a viewpoint on this because you published it in the Boston Globe. So I'll let you lead this off, and then we'll go around the table.
Sure. So I'm going to speak mostly here to math and science and world language, because that's where we've really been hearing, in both of our roles on faculty council, we've really been hearing a lot of concerns from those teachers. And I think that the multi-level issues that Kathy spoke to have manifested, in addition to several other issues that have come about in the time since.
So let's start with cutting to the chase. Has it been a good policy or not?
No, but I want to caveat that by saying that calling it a policy is generous because there was no support. The budget was zero. There was no training. There were no time, no resources. We were basically just put in a room with kids from different levels and told to just do it, make it work. So
there wasn't a consolidated curriculum set of materials that to address the core that everyone would be learning. Well, let me ask you this, and this is kind of a dumb question, but are there some things that they're all learning at the same time? I mean, I don't understand the fundamental idea of putting people, like, obviously you wouldn't put people learning French and Russian in the same classroom. So there's got to be, right, there's got to be some, even though they're both languages, right? There's got to be some overlap in what you're teaching the students. Is there a way that you can, is there a core of that everybody's learning in that classroom and then you have add-ons to it for different students? How does that work?
Well, I think in theory, maybe that's something that you can try to do. I think that when it was implemented and I spoke to students who are in it, we've heard from teachers since, that often that's what they try, is they say, well, you know, if we're trying to meet the needs of all of these kids, because we do try to make it work. But what you just said is the exact challenge, is how do I make sure that there's such a wide spread of student background, of student foundation, particularly in things like math or world language or science, which all build upon the things you've done before. I mean, take world language as an example, where higher level world language classes are taught entirely in the language of instruction, right, that you're learning. Lower level language classes, that's not true, because they're still learning in the vocab and everything. So how do you mix those two classes together and make sure that every student is getting the experience that they need to really meet their potential and to have the best learning experience they can? And that's what we've had happen, is we've just been unable.
So let me just understand this. So you're saying that students that are fairly fluent in a language are in the same classroom with students who don't have a basic vocabulary in that language?
Well, I think the language teachers would say, I would not say they're fluent, but I think the language teachers would say students who are at a place where they're ready to engage fully in the language of instruction.
At least able to comprehend classroom instruction in that language.
Yeah.
And there are other students who would need to hear it in English to understand what they were supposed to be doing. And how is that working?
We have, from what we've heard, and I presented a petition to the school committee that I also referenced in the Globe article. The faculty council collected signatures from 3 departments, math, science, and world language, which included nearly every signature of every teacher who's taught there for at least 3 years.
Everywhere, so both high schools then?
Only South.
Oh, only South. Okay.
North doesn't have a faculty council, so our jurisdiction is just South.
Okay. So every math, science, and world language teacher at Newton South signed a petition?
Nearly every. I think we had 1 or 2 holdouts. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Nearly every one of those 3 subject area teachers at South signed a petition that says what? What would they like to have happen?
That says we believe that the multi-level initiative as implemented has been ineffective for both for students and teachers. We think it's been worse for a lot of the kids that it was supposed to help initially, which are some of our lower performers. It hasn't solved the problems that it's intended to solve. And what we would like is we'd like a rollback of the multi-level model, at least for the time being. We're not saying we want to go back to tracked classes permanently because we know they have problems, but we'd like to roll them back and then develop a pilot in concert with the central administrative team, with the school committee, with anyone else, to try to figure out what works, to do it right, do it the way that it should have been done 3 years ago, where there's a metric for success, there's a plan for data collection, there's plans for supports, and then we can figure out, okay, is this working, is it not working, and move from there.
Thanks, Ryan, and we'll get more follow-up on that in a little bit, but let's hear from the other band. Joe, how's it working in your classroom?
Great in my class, but I teach English, and it was rolled out 16 years ago. We've actually had multi-level classes at Newton South for, I think it's 16 years now. Mm-hmm. When they were rolled out, we rolled it out very differently than they were just rolled out in math and science. And we have had for a long time multi-level, we have still history, English, and we had science. We had multi-level science happening, and so there is actually a model for this to work. There are actually a couple multi-level language classes. I think Russian does actually have, I don't think there's enough students who take Russian for it to be a 9th grade, 10th grade, like leveled like that. So there are ways to make it work. It's harder. It takes a lot of time. And I could explain the sort of nuances of like how you would set up a class and what it would work like. But I think I'm...
Well, in your classroom, just generally, is there, obviously going back to ancient Greece, there's kind of a lecture model in Western education, right? Where the teacher gets up in front of a group of people and says some words and maybe writes them down on a board or puts up slides or something, right? do you have one lecture that's directed at all levels, or do you have like a lecture for one group, and then while the other group is doing individual work in small groups, and then a lecture for the next group? How does that work as a practice?
Yes. Yes, all of that. Like, there will be days when I'll stand up and I'll say, okay, we're going to review what happened in the chapter, and so they read last night, and we'll review what happened in the chapter, and then I will pass out to one set of kids, here is like this paragraph, and I want you to analyze this paragraph. And to another set of kids, here is these 2 paragraphs, and I want you to analyze these 2 paragraphs. And then to the third set of kids, I'm going to say, okay, take these 2 paragraphs by the end of the class, I want you to have a thesis, and I want you to break down 3 images. And so they'll get slightly different instructions to attack what we read last night in different sizes and different amounts.
So, also, you mentioned that in English, this has been going on for 16 years.
Yeah.
Is it all the English classes?
No. And so that's actually like also a really good point. I think that I'm sort of disagreeing with Ryan a little, but also agreeing with him mostly in a lot of ways because I think multi-level has a place. I think it actually does some amazingly valuable things for lots of kids. When we started the program, we started with, I think it was 40 kids, and we had demand for 100+ kids within 2 years. The program doubled in size. Another program was
So
created.
it was voluntary. So
It was voluntary, yeah.
Opt-in.
Opt-in.
Yeah, it was an opt-in system for teachers, and it was an opt-in system for students. I think it's been highly effective.
So what's good? What's the best thing about it? What does it do?
The best thing about it is, so actually, we were talking about this before. Some kids come into high school, and they are maybe not fully baked and ready to go in like
Is there
day
any who
one.
are anymore?
Oh yeah, no, there are kids who come in day one and they are ready to take their kids in calculus, right? 9th graders come in, they go to calculus. They are ready for some serious high school work. And there are kids who come in, a lot of kids who come in and are trying to get their feet in the ground. We have to make a decision by January. Are you taking honors next year? Are you taking ACP?
By January or
By
freshman
January
year?
of freshman year. Because that's really February, but we're using the grades through January. And then what happens just by the nature of tracking, if we only have tracking, you end up with these kids midway through their freshman year getting locked into a track. Because it's actually really difficult. If you are locked into that, like say middle track, ACP, and somebody else goes into honors, that honors class in 10th grade is going to do, say, 2 more units, 2 more books. They're going to go faster. That kid in 10th grade who didn't get selected for honors, wasn't ready for it at the midway point of 9th grade, now needs to make a big jump if they ever want to make it to an honors class.
Let me just ask a dumb question. When I was at Newton South, the honors class, we were reading some pretty hard stuff. We read As I Lay Dying. We read, without going through the entire set of literature, I wouldn't think that it would have been appropriate to read for kids that weren't really very, very high level in English, frankly. Do you have different reading assignments for different kids, or do you just not have the hardest reading assignments?
Yes. So what I try to do in my class is have a variety of reading assignments, right? And so like the first book of the year is actually quite easy, and I ask the honors kids to do something more difficult with it, because a book can be relatively easy to read and still require some pretty difficult analytical skills. And later in the year, we read The Great Gatsby. Everybody reads it, right? We read Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. Everybody
And
reads
what
it.
year of high school is this?
That's in my 11th grade class.
Okay. So just so I understand, you're saying, I kind of cut you off and said, the benefit is that you don't have to track as much? Or
So the benefit is that you get a kid in 9th grade who you can't say, like, man, if I put you in honors next year, I don't know. Like, you're kind of ready. This might be really hard for you. So now you really you have a binary choice. Honors, not honors. And that has a 4-year trajectory implication for that kid. Some kids actually gain skills and confidence. They sort of settle in emotionally. They get better and better at things. And so a multi-level class allows a kid to look at me junior year and say, I want to try the honors class. I want to try the work that the honors kids are doing. And they can opt into that. And some kids find out, like, they're just like, I can't do it. It's too many things right now, too much. And some kids really start to push themselves. Kids who, if they had been in sort of that mid-track ACP class, might not have had that same opportunity to push themselves, are now able to grab for this higher thing. And if it starts to work, they level up. Well, and that to me sounds like what education ought to do. And it's not, I'm definitely not advocating that, like, we need to go multi-level in every class all the time, everywhere.
Okay,
but
so as an opt-in for teachers and an opt-in for students, you
can
think
work.
in English and any other subjects?
History, science, and the only world language has it, and so that leaves math is the one that, like, where we're sort of stuck. right?
Okay.
For a variety of reasons. I wouldn't even pretend to understand. Like,
Okay, well, it looks like there's some agreement already, but only maybe maybe not with world language or science, because it sounds like some of the faculty members who teach those things aren't as enthused about this. But we're going to bring the other panels in. Get right back to you, Ryan, though. Anping, you're on the school committee. You were there
Yes.
when Kathy Shields made that comment.
I do not recall clearly, but Kathy Shield was very thoughtful school committee member, and I had a very many private conversation with her, and I appreciate her perspective. And now I heard her voice, and she asks good questions, and I always kind of admire her input. But let's come back to this topic. And I remember when Ryan, I'm calling you Ryan and not
First names at the table.
Okay.
First names at the table. I'll forget people's last names.
Yeah.
Tendulkar.
So
I already forgot. I'm sorry.
when he sent school committee the petition and the data, I think end of the October, I was so impressed because this possibly the first time we received such a comprehensive, discussion with the data. And I did something first time. I sent Ryan my personal feedback. I said, Ryan, thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it. And I was a little bit nervous. Normally, you see, we receive hundreds of, community emails. You do not respond. And normally, you are not encouraged to respond as individual person. But anyway, and then Ryan came back.
They can't get you in trouble. You're in your fourth term already.
Okay.
Well,
Well, thank you. I need to make a
you
statement.
can do whatever you want now.
Here, I'm talking as could be a school committee member, but also as a concerned committee member, and as a parent, and as educator, lifelong educator. Coming back to Joe's input, I appreciate that too. Why? This reminds me of my student experience at the college in China when I was majored in English. And at that time, my English was way advanced than many of my classmates. I was 5 to 6 years older than them. Why? Because Cultural Revolution, Mao Zedong thought school should be all closed. And then Deng Xiaoping came on. I'm sorry talking about Chinese history now.
No, it's great.
And he reopened the schools. So I went to the college. But I taught myself English for 5 years. But some other students, younger classmates, and they're learning A, B, C, D, alphabetic letters. But anyway, school had to put us together. So I was the kind of victim in this environment. And unfortunately, I think I wasted probably 2 or 3 years in college because we are waiting for my classmates to catch up. So coming back here, you mentioned one word I thought it's important. We probably need to keep in mind, opt-in. That's important.
Opt-in.
Opt-in. And also, language might be a little bit different from the science and the math. Because, again, I think, Ryan, you presented the faculty, the South faculty, the survey, and was very convincing. Even though I could see, I reviewed before I came here, there are few small percentage of teachers thought multi-levels was not bad, gave the 4. No one gave a 5. I don't recall give 5 or 4 out of 5. But most faculty gave the 1, means the least effective. So also another interesting data, I appreciate that, 22 to 23 and 23 to 24. When you look at 23 to 24, the data getting worse.
23 to 24 what? I'm sorry.
The survey.
School years.
The years. 20 the year.
That means probably teacher first give some hope, had some hope, expectation. This could help. And then after a year or 2, they realize it's not working because now I got the feedback. So that's important. And another thing I'd like to mention for committee, because when you present, I think November 4th school committee meeting, you were the first. And then the third teacher, Kim Curtis, if I remember, she gave a very impressive input. Why? She said, I taught both stand alone CP course, but also the multi-level courses. And she said same level students in the CP standalone or multi-level classes.
And what subject?
That's the thing. They took the same tests, including the final test. And the students in the standalone CP classes outperform all those students, same level students in the multi-level classes.
Is that a math class?
Science.
Or science.
She did not say that, so I don't know, but science.
Science. Okay.
I thought that data was really authentic. Now we're talking about same level students, and they perform in different classes, and she got the data show outperform every aspect.
I'm curious, is this something that your colleagues on the school committee are discussing at all? Is this something people are talking about?
If you're talking about this, I don't know if Ryan stated that throughout the school committee meeting, normally we do not address public comment, by the way. You know, there could be 10, 20 people come here.
Right.
But that day, my two colleagues, Paul Levy and Rajiv, and they both commented on this. And I said, okay, if they commented, I had a strong reaction, said, I'm going to comment too. So I really made a strong statement. I said, based on data Ryan presented, and also the teachers' feedback, I thought this is a serious issue. And I even say something, you know, that's a public meeting. I said, this should be the serious learning moment for us, or teachable moment for our district. When you're making policies regarding this kind of curriculum or programs, you really have to do serious work.
Have you had a chance to discuss this with the superintendent, Anna Nolan, yet?
Well, we certainly had some, discussion, but I cannot review to you because this is not at the public school committee meeting.
You don't have to tell me what it was, but
But Ryan's article.
This is something that people are talking. Okay, yeah.
Well, and the last thing, just a little bit joke. One night I was reading the news, and I happened to read the Wall Street Journal article. And that article mentioned Ryan's article, and I saw my name in that article.
He's a celebrity.
A little bit of Ryan's celebrity is rubbing off.
Yeah, I said, Paul and Rajiv.
He's a superstar, and you're
Three of us
merely a
mentioned.
star.
But that article was poorly written. Basically,
Right.
he just
The Wall Street
copied
Journal
all.
one?
Yeah, but anyway. So in that sense, it's not only a state.
But this is, I'm just trying to get a sense. Is anything going to change? Is there anything in the works? Do you know?
No doubt. District has to do something. But that takes time, by the way. Curriculum, as Joe mentioned.
I've got a daughter in 3rd grade. Will the change be in place before she's at South?
No doubt. With Ryan's and all other people's strong push, we have to do something, and I'm sure.
Sumukh, we've been talking for a while, and we haven't even gotten you into the conversation. You've been involved in the parent discussion of this?
Look, I appreciate people like Anping who are out there on the school committee. And before COVID, sorry about this, I really didn't listen into school committees. I knew there were people on school committee, but I was not engaged. But I also, in the other time, whatever I have left, I volunteer as a parent judge for debate team. And I drive the kids back and forth.
Is that the high school debate team?
High school debate team. And I drive kids back and forth to the different tournaments. And I would hear this thing in the car going around the kids talking about mixed level classes. And as I probed more, it was obviously very clear for math. Kids, especially on both the ends, I heard were just struggling, because if you're an honors or advanced kid, you are being assessed on things which you necessarily not were taught, or not taught at the level of depth.
So you're being assessed on things that why?
Because if the teacher is going to teach you one concept, the teacher has to differentiate in what the assessment is going to be for honors and for non-honors kids. You have to, right? Otherwise, what's the difference? Why call it H
So
and
the
ACT?
teacher teaches one broad thing to the whole classroom.
Let me give an example.
Please.
It's a real, because I think it's kind of, without example, it's going to talk about simple thing like compounding interest rate.
Okay.
Right? You can talk about compounds every month, every day, or you can talk about continuous compounding, which has its very much implications in physics, etc. And that goes into E raised to. It's a very kind of as a teacher, if I'm teaching it to the kids who are thinking of continuous compounding and also teaching about like the basic compounding,
Like monthly compounding or something?
I'm going to spend like just a little time on that, but I have to assess them. And the kids who are now getting assessed for a topic which was basically not covered in a level of depth were like struggling because like, okay, I'm an honors kid, I'm supposed to know, but I was not being taught. And so that was number one. I have to say, I also heard in the humanities class, right? Because humanities, I think, obviously teachers do a great job at teaching. But in humanities, a lot of teaching comes from peer group as well. And let's just pick up a topic. Let's talk about a government class.
Government, okay.
Right? You can either like listen to teacher or you can become prepared for a class and actually challenge each other's, right? And in high school, that's a part of it. But then if you're in a class where you are not necessarily at the, I don't like to call it same level because I think it's, maybe there's a better word, but that's not the intent. The intent is like it's a different level class. Then suddenly you're finding some kids who are not as engaged and some kids who are just talking too much. And you don't want to be in a high school, you don't want to be the kid who is really smart or you don't want a kid who is not very smart. And I think like that caused a tension amongst the people.
So there's a social pressure towards the middle, you're saying?
There's a social pressure not to
stand out,
embarrass someone, and there is definitely there's a social pressure not to come across as a kid who is like not with the pack either. So
right.
And that kind of like affected the kids on both the sides. That's when I started paying attention to it. And look, I think you have to just look at Russian School of Math as a proxy. I think there's some data I'm sure I hope we can get into. Russian School of Math opened a second branch in Newton, across from the Star Market in Newtonville. It used to be right here in Wells Avenue.
It still is in Wells.
It's still, and like the core problem which was around equity, which I think is like, we all care about equity. We don't believe our children are any special or deserve anything special. Everyone needs to do it. But this part itself, the fact now you have creating inequities between parents who can afford or manage to send their kids to Russian school or tutor or something else, and parents who cannot. And that itself is a level of inequity which has been created, which otherwise was not in the case before.
All right, well, it sounds like we've got some common ground here. I think the most extreme lack of common ground might still be. No, I'm gonna let Joe talk directly to. Let's pick on Sumukh here about because you talked about you think even in the social sciences you think there should be. It sounds like you don't think the multi-level thing is ideal even there. So I wanna let the two of you discuss. Why don't you, Joe? Why don't you tell us what's working in your classroom and why it should continue in the social.
Can I do one other thing first?
You can do whatever you want.
Nice. Smart TV.
Yeah.
I would actually say that the one I actually agree with you. The Russian School of Math causes all kinds of problems, but those actually predate any multi-level situation. That actually the Russian School of Math has always been an equity issue because kids who move up to honors and higher level classes are almost many of them are just in Russian School of Math and moving up that way. So it's always been an issue. And you get kids who, like I have vivid memories of kids in honors math realizing like, I'm the only kid in here who didn't pay to go to Russian School of Math. Like I'm scared. And they're fine. But so that like the multi-level thing in Russian School of Math, that has always been.
Well, let's focus it for now on what you teach.
So I teach English, and I actually think Anping's example is actually excellent as well. If you have like a really, really huge range, like I'm reading literature and I'm at that level, I'm learning ABCs, doesn't work. Like that would be almost impossible to imagine. But mostly high schools aren't like that. Like mostly those aren't the ranges we're looking at. And so what you have in a classroom where like you're sort of describing like, kids who feel like, well, am I in this pack or I'm in this pack? That happens in, like I taught AP Lit for years. It happens in that class, right? There's like segregating kids, like tracking kids doesn't solve that problem. You get kids in the middle who are like, do I get to talk? Those kids are brilliant. And kids at the bottom who are just suffering their way through the class. And these are kids all in AP Lit, all of them. The top 20 students in English literature, like that they're performing at the highest level, and that same dynamic plays out in that room. It plays out there because they're just, it's how it is. You look around and you're like, wow, I'm intimidated, or like I know everything and I'm going to talk. It is how it is. And so I don't.
It's not any worse though if you've got even a broader array.
So I think you have to be like more aware of it in a broader array. And I think that like one of the huge problems we had was there was just no training for teachers to like walk into a room with kids at all the levels. Like when we started the multi-level program, we spent 2 weeks in the summer paid working on how to do this. And they're like, just as a sort of tiny example, one of the big questions is, do you label the kids? Do you say, well, if you're taking the class, like you're taking the class for honors credit, you're taking the class for CP credit, wouldn't that embarrass kids? And like any place this is done, the standard like conventional wisdom is like, just name it. Like the kids know, they know, they're not gonna be like shocked or surprised. And so you just name it and normalize it because people are at different levels. People do perform at different levels. Every kid in school knows that. And so when you say, okay, some of you are taking this test for CP credit, some of you are taking it for honors credit, and you normalize it, it feels normal. It doesn't feel stigmatizing. Like you help to normalize like, hey, different.
You don't hide it and like,
No,
I'm not
right,
going to tell you what test Jimmy's getting.
And that basic, and I remember hearing my colleagues in math and science, like in various meetings, sort of professional groups, trying to figure out how to handle that. And I was like, oh, there's like an answer. And you all are you're just walking into the classroom and you've never been given the tools, you've never had the chance to process this, and now you've got 3 levels of kids, or 2 levels of kids, you're trying not to embarrass anybody. All of these things that kids are feeling, they get turned up and amplified. And there is actually, like if you'd spent a couple hours preparing for this, or a couple days, or as we got, weeks to try to do it right, you can do it fairly effectively. And it's never gonna be perfect.
All right, Sumukh, are you persuaded now?
I really hope my child has you for English next
Can
year.
I follow up with Joe's?
Sure. Let Sumukh may finish his point.
No, I think for certain, I don't think there's like a clear answer here, which is like this is absolutely evil or this is absolutely great. Yeah. For some teachers,
I mean, the world isn't all black and white. Oh my goodness. We've learned something here today.
There's something called common ground, right? That's right. Look, for some teachers, and with a certain class size,
It's huge.
and I think that is important. Like some classes are like really big, like literally. I know there was one year when my son was he had difficulty seeing from the back, and the teacher was gracious enough for the entire semester. He sat in teacher's chair. Like some of these classes are really big. So I think like the more variables you add, the experience starts getting more and more difficult. So you have like the teacher tenure. Number one teacher, like let's just be honest, there are some really great teachers and some teachers who are like getting to that path, right? So that, and then obviously there's a class dynamic.
I'm not sure we can say here that there aren't all the teachers aren't great. Are we allowed to say that? No.
I mean, we're all continuing to try to grow and improve our
Everyone's had that experience as a student, right? Of like you've got your favorite teachers and the ones. Anyway, go ahead.
So I think the variables is what causes it, and then like in a high school, there are 4 years. If the 1 year which you have, if you're caught that short end of the stick, which is a bigger class, the teacher is not prepared, or teacher has not been supported and everything, it's 25% of experience right there. And that builds on to the, talk about tracking or not, like it builds on that for the next year and the year after. So I think that variability is what we are looking to also kind of like limit within public schools. And I think that becomes a factor.
All right, I'm going to let Anping into this.
I think one thing I have to make very clear, as school committee member, we don't have the jurisdiction or purview to discuss the curriculum per se. So I'm more talking as the educator myself.
I'm gonna make an observation though, Anping.
Well,
you hire the superintendent.
Well,
I mean,
yes.
let's not kid ourselves. If you have a view, if the school committee has a view, the superintendent's going to listen to
you should
that.
be educated on this. Okay. We have five kind of purviews or legal areas we can do, hire or fire or evaluate the superintendent. That's number one, and have a teacher union contract. That's number two, and then the budget. Number three.
School districting?
Yes, and this district-wide policies like school time, right?
Yeah.
Closing school, building school, and any other.
But legally, within your purview is determining whether you want to, for example, fund a program to do multi-level classrooms, or whether you don't think that's a priority for funding.
But I need to make that very clear to everybody and people watching our
program. No, but the school committee certainly could say, I hear what the teachers here are saying about there not being adequate support for this. We're going to fund, we're going to have a training program. That's something you could do if you thought this was worth continuing. Or you might,
if we receive strong input or the community members saying, hey, this is not working, if a superintendent does not do anything. Now that's the problem when we evaluate the superintendent. We say, you're not solving the problem. What are you doing here? That's but we do not say this program was not good. Let's close this program.
No. But you can ask the superintendent. Have you heard this input? What are your thoughts on it?
But
I've been in some of the rooms for this conversation.
You were there.
My good friend Margaret Albright has had many of those conversations with superintendents.
But I like to say that the first, I think we need to acknowledge
school committee,
that district did not provide enough strong professional development to roll this out, the multi-level classes. Even though there might be some pilot program here and there, but not systematic. Especially now, if this no longer opt-in program, I mean, all students will put in there, then that's a huge problem here. So I think this is a failure on the district leadership here, right here. But I also like to acknowledge that they might have good intention, the good rationale why they want to do this. We have to acknowledge this. And I work at the State Department of Education. I heard some data analysts say they were a little bit sick and tired to put out all the data to show different category of racial, ethnic groups. If certain group always perform in a very low level, and year after year, they even don't want to do that. You see, this is very important here. So I thought one of the reasons why they roll out the multi-level programs is to disrupt the structure which separates students in different categories. I don't know if we can fully accept this rationale, but I think there was very good reason to do something to help the kids. Now, I think that's important. And also the self-esteem, you can say, that's important. Not every student in this category, but I'm sure if some students put into program, they're always kind of low level. And I hope you don't mind, you said smart, not smart kids. If you use that kind of category, say, you are not smart. That's why you're in this class. And those are smart kids. If students heard this again, by high school, they said, that's it, I'm not smart. I'm not going to do anything. You can say whatever you like. And that's very dangerous. That's lifelong. Okay. So
I want to let Sumukh respond to that, because I'm not sure that's exactly.
I hope I'm not picking you, but you might be.
Absolutely not. I think this is, we're all friends here, right? We're all here for the right reason. Let's just be.
Yes.
By the way, I absolutely agree that people who proposed it with the right intentions. No question about that. In my opinion, anyone who works in public school or educating our kids does it purely out of good intentions. It's like otherwise, people out here could be doing something else and making more
Anyone
money.
who can teach math could be making a lot more money doing something
I guarantee
else.
you that.
There's no doubt. I'm probably English as well, but But I mean, there's a lot of demand for. I'm just saying that's our economy now. It could change, but And
on top of that, like when it got framed in the context of equity, I agree with you. I do not want any child, and by the way, my children are good at some things and they are challenged at something else as well, right? So or need support. But I think if you look at the data, and I just looked at one simple data point. I'm not a school committee member, I'm not an educator, but I can look at simple data. And I looked at MCAS
You're
math.
in management, that's your job probably,
something
right?
like that, yeah. MCAS math, 10th grade, right? I looked at 2019 versus 2024. 2019 was the last year before COVID, and before this was implemented, and 2024 is the most recent. And what I found is the disparity, which is the difference how much African American / black kids are from the all the kid average.
In the Newton Public Schools.
In Newton Public Schools.
So the
Nationwide.
disparity got greater.
Disparity
Yeah,
got greater
great.
for African American, Black, for Latino and Hispanic kids, and
In the Newton Public
in
Schools.
Newton Public School, and
So
significantly.
they did farther away. What a standard deviation? How far? do you-
Not standard deviation, it's just the average, the difference, right? Like it is. This is
Okay.
for
No, I
all
know.
the kids. This
But
is
I mean,
for
how much? How much different?
quite meaningfully. I don't have the data with me. I'll glad to kind of follow up.
Statistically meaningful difference.
It's
though.
significantly meaningful, like significantly. So, look, I think at some point you don't need the third level of degree of standard deviation to realize if something's. Listen to the teacher. Listen to By the way, the kids also went out and
So
wrote.
your point is, okay, if our goal was to create more equity,
It did
we
not.
have failed at that. In fact, done the exact opposite.
Exactly.
I would go ahead, Ryan.
Sorry,
It's been a while.
Yeah, Ryan's turn.
Add to that. So I think one thing to be right, we're nothing in the petition and nothing really in our faculty council was ever. We never got to the point where we were debating the merits of multi-level classes or not. We were debating the merits of multi-level classes as implemented at Newton South, and we want those classes rolled back because we know that they're not working. To Sumukh's point, we have. I mean, there was just data presented, I think this past week, which is new, that shows one of the goals, right, was because we have Black students, which were disproportionately represented at the CP level, the lowest level, and in science, at least in multi-level, we now have 55% of our Black students are enrolled at the lowest level of class, which I've been told is higher than it was under the single level model. So I think there just has to be an acknowledgement that this model has failed, it isn't working, we need to roll it back, and we also acknowledge that track classes have problems too, right? And I don't think it's the choice for us is not do we do track classes or do we stay the course and do multi-level as it is, right? There are a whole bunch of possibilities, right? And I think one of the things that's been missing in the district is we don't get to explore those possibilities because nobody asked us, right? Nobody came to us, what do you guys need to do this? How can we make sure this goes well? What do you guys think might be good ways to try to solve these problems that we're seeing in our tracked classes, right? Where are these problems coming from? How do we fix those? And so really just going back, and I don't think we don't need more time. We don't need another year of review to go through test scores or to come up with common assessments. I think that all of that is just unnecessary, and we need to just call it as it is, which is this model is not working in math, science, and world language at least.
Yeah, that's why your data very convincing, and again, this is a complicated issue. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that, but again, you are not expanding this discussion to the other rationale or the ideology behind that. Why are you doing this? But we cannot forget why this happening, during the past few years. And many educators probably were very deeply concerned about those chronically low-performing students, how to help them. But good intention does not mean you will have good results. If you just do whatever, I have good intention, I want to do this. Well, you need other things to support your.
And I would completely echo what Ryan just said. Like, the program that I'm part of came about, and the multi-level program that's been in place for, more than 15 years. It came about because there was a guy I was teaching, we were team teaching another class, and we were talking, and then it was essentially like Newton South was going to grow. We knew that. It was getting much bigger, and we were looking for ways to make it feel like a smaller, tighter place, and somebody was asking that question. Teachers, what do you think are things that are going to help? What do you think what things do you want to do? And we got a huge grant from, I think it was the Gates Foundation actually, back in the day, and
$250,000.
yeah, and that money was it was not turned over to us, but we had a lot of say, and we created a program from the ground up, like a group of teachers working together in 3 different disciplines, and it was our program. And every time, it came time to figure out, do we change this or change that, we had a voice. And I'm going to shout out Michael Kozik, who has just left the Newton Public Schools, but he just fought and fought and fought for all the things that program needed and made sure our voice. He spent years making sure our voice was at the table as often as he could to say, if you want a program like this to work, we can have a program where kids have more flexibility to move up levels, and teacher voice needs to be there. We need to have sort of well, and the other thing I haven't brought up, but I think actually we did bring it up, the class sizes are small. The only department in Newton South that has a cap on the number of students is English. It was put in the contract more than 20 years ago. I don't know, before I got there. It was in the contract. But so because English is part of this program, it meant that the history teacher and the science teacher had classes that were in the low 20s. And it makes a huge, this was your point earlier, it makes a huge difference. Like the complexity in the class goes up and up with every added student. And now you have 3 levels, 2 levels. If you keep it small, you can do it. And if you grow up to, if you have a math class of, what do you have right now? What's your biggest?
This year is a little bit better. It's 26 is my biggest.
26, which was a hard, fast line, never over 23. Fast line, none of us would have done it over 23, and we stood by it.
Sounds like we've got some common ground. I want to wrap up this topic by putting my 2 cents in. First of all, I've got to say, I know Sumukh said he's not an educator, but I feel like I learned something from everybody at the table tonight. I think you're all educators right here, right now. And thank you for all presenting your viewpoint so articulately. I think this is terrific. I think I mostly agree with what I see as a general consensus at the table. I want to make a couple observations, maybe with a shade of disagreement, but not an extreme one. I feel like there's a fundamental misunderstanding on the part of some people out there, no one at this table, as to what equity means. Equity doesn't mean the same thing for everyone. It means meeting everyone's needs as well as you can. And so it would be like, it would be like me going to the hospital and saying, I need an operation of my hand. And so, well, we have an equity policy. We're doing heart surgery on you because we're doing heart surgery on this other person, everyone needs heart surgery. I might not need heart surgery. I might just need a hand operation. Different students have different needs. They need to be challenged in certain subjects. They need to be, frankly, need some extra help getting up to speed in other subjects. And I don't think there's anything fundamentally inequitable about tracking if it's successful tracking. In other words, if it provides what each individual student needs, puts them in an environment where they're going to be stimulated and supported and realize their potential within that subject. And I think it's not a matter of whether they're smart or not. There's some kids that are brilliant writers who have a lot of trouble with math. I have one in my family like that, and there are others who are, really, really math geniuses and are going to have a lot of trouble, structuring an essay, right? And so you want to challenge them in the thing they're good at and help them build and become the best they can in that, and at the same time support them in the other areas. If the public schools, I guess just where I'm coming from is, I think the one key ingredient in democracy is good public schools. Everything else is optional. If you don't have good access to education for everybody, democracy is a short-lived experiment. And to me, the key to that is you cannot have a differential that Sumukh referenced based on affluence and access to private supplemental programs, or it ceases to be at a certain point full public education. Basically, if you only get part of the product from the public schools and you have to go to, I know people refer to Russian School of Math, but there's a million. There's Singapore Math, there's Math Monkey, there's Mathnasium. There's a million of them, right? And if you feel like you need that additional something, or in some cases, parents, my wife's a high school math teacher, we can help our kids with math, without an outside program. If you don't have that supplemental outside the school resource, then you don't have an equitable system, and ultimately you don't really have a public education system. You have what I would call a quasi-public education system if you have to pay money for part of what ought to be in the basic package. And for that reason, I think we do have an obligation not to, I would say, use the kids as laboratory rats and throw in a program and say, hey, we're changing this without the support and without the planning. I think that was a real mistake 5 years ago. And maybe I'm saying this in stronger terms than might be politically correct, but I think we made a real mistake then. I do think that as an opt-in model, if you can be creative and have the support, it can be a good thing. But even honestly, in the social sciences, some of the best education I've had have been people who are really into a subject. I'm not saying they're smarter, but it's their thing. Like in a seminar in college where there's 15 people around the table and everybody's really into it. We're in a law school discussion. Those are the best, most intellectually stimulating conversations where everybody's kind of all in on it. So I think, frankly, Joe's classroom is the exception that proves the rule. He's found a way to make it work, but that's just maybe his genius and his talent, that he's made something that's really hard to make work. But that shouldn't be the model for everybody else. That's really hard to do. And that's not going to work in most classrooms. And if you try to, and if you impose it on people, particularly without the resources, I think it's a formula for disaster.
I think there are some really good things happening in Newton Public School, which I believe, look, just because you are born in a wrong zip code or something.
Sumukh, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
So why the Newton Public Schools are the one reason why my family moved to Newton in the 1970s, and the one reason why I chose to buy a house in Newton. It is what makes Newton Newton, because the Newton Public Schools, all the other things that are good about Newton, other than its geographic location and its parks, are the people, are based on the people who live here, and the people who live here are attracted by the school.
I was just going to make a small quick point, but there are programs like Calculus Project, where they really encourage and invest in kids off the school year to make sure that they are really up to speed and ready for the next time. I think those are kind of programs like that, which I believe should be funded more, which will result in lowering reducing the inequities or disparities that exist out there. So there are programs.
You can never eliminate it entirely, but you certainly can make big strides, and we have an obligation to do everything we can to make those strides.
Do we have a couple of minutes? I can share a story.
You can, but can we just very quickly do a mental health in schools? I think you were going to. So here's the question: you're on the school committee. You've been on the school committee for 7 years. Mental health in the public schools is a huge issue. There's a lot of stress on the kids. When I was at Newton South, there was a suicide. Kid hanged himself on the stage. There's been a lot of horrible things, mental health-wise, a lot of pressures on the kids in the schools. How are we doing, Anping, in addressing mental health issues in the Newton Public Schools? What grade would you, Professor, give the school system?
Thank you. By the way, the first year I came on the school committee, I organized a local forum, and the topic is the well-being of Asian American youth. That's first time I came on. Oh, you remember?
I was there.
And Newton Free Library, the Drucker Auditorium, packed, if you remember that.
I remember. Overflowing into the hallway almost.
It's unbelievable. And why? Because even though many parents did not want to talk openly, now I'm talking about the immigrant families, they came from different culture. Normally they always feel a little bit vulnerable, many reasons. And I organized this. I did not expect that would be such a well-attended. And we invited the BU professor, the Korean American professor, to talk about all those issues. And that's something at school committee meeting.
We only have 2 minutes left in the show. How are we doing on this?
Yeah, and the reason we should pay more attention now is because COVID-19, which impact tremendously. If you look at all the data, after COVID-19, the data is getting worse. I even checked the. Now we don't have.
I want to give time a second to our teachers.
I want to say that based on the risk behavior survey, which is the very authentic and is a golden standard of the survey, and about 15% of kids were thinking about.
I want to let Ryan talk about the mental health issues.
I think there's more we should be doing. I think to meet the needs of our students, we need to have social workers in the buildings. We need to have, for example, floating BTs, so that when our BTs are
What's
out,
a BT?
Behavioral therapist. So that way, when one of our behavioral therapists is absent, they have close connection with the student. We'll have someone who also knows those students who can then go and work with those kids. I was really pleased to hear the school committee express a desire for more funding for these kinds of things, and I hope that in our, we have a joint labor management committee on this issue, and I hope that they'll accept our proposals on this.
Joe, anything quick on this?
I think we are much better at social emotional health than we were even before COVID, but I think the needs are higher. I think things like Anping's initiative to get people to talk about this stuff, we've gotten a lot better, and the needs are very high.
Thank you. Sumukh?
Agree.
All right, well, thank you all so much for being on.
Okay.
Thank you, Anping. Thank you, Sumukh.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ryan, our superstar here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. You're all superstars.
And
But-
can I add that I would appreciate that the union pushed for the social worker
And
to every elementary school.
Thank you to our fabulous crew, our director Will, to Peter and everyone at New TV, and to you at home for watching. Please join us again next time when we try to find just an iota more of common ground.